Hello, welcome back, Jonathan Greenberg. So lovely to talk to you again. Thank you for agreeing to sit down for an interview again with me. I hope we're briefer than we were last time because I indulgently chatted to you for ages, but today I know I'll be shorter because I have to go to a children's birthday party. How are you feeling having survived all of the drama?
Well, I mean, we've all survived it. Our democracy has survived it. I just feel a tremendous sense of relief. I really didn't, I know Trump so well, and when I first, I guess my story in July in the Washington Post, 12 indicators that Trump would create a fascist dictatorship in his second term. It was the first piece, I think, in the mainstream media to use the word fascism in its title regarding Trump as to what we were headed for. And, when I wrote this book, America 2034, in which Trump, which basically, basically the first chapter is how he steals this election by declaring a state of emergency in martial law. It sort of anticipates what he was capable of and where it would take us.
Well, let's discuss the ways in which that book plot parallels what so nearly happened, in that we're now speculating that with the additional details we're learning about today from the Washington Post, that there was somebody inside sending messages to Oathkeeper militia about the location of lawmakers and saying they're all in the tunnels now, turn on the gas, with the evident intention of just wiping out America's legislative branch and presumably then declaring martial law as per your book.
Yes. Well, I mean, two really big and interesting questions that we could just sort of touch on is, what was Trump's plan and how close did he come to winning his attempted coup and becoming, the dictator or the president for life, or the first American dictator. And I think he came very close. Now, we don't know what weapons the Oath Keepers or the people who were there actually had, because the police let them walk out. I mean, I've been at demonstrations, anti-war demonstrations, the RNC demonstration against Bush in 2004 in Madison Square Garden, where literally thousands of people were arrested when they were penned in by police in what was a legal demonstration because they decided, that you can't be here. You walked over onto the sidewalk, when literally there was no other place to go, for doing absolutely nothing. And taken held in the case of Guantanamo and the Hudson in New York City and Mayor Michael Bloomberg, a black mark in the history of the First Amendment and the right to assemble, for absolutely for 40 hours, simply because Bloomberg didn't want them to embarrass the city of New York. Are you familiar with that whole thing?
I am not.
Yeah. So, I mean, anyway, people have been arrested for just being not
at a First Amendment legally valid demonstration.
People walked out with whatever they had in their pockets, with whatever they had in their backpacks. So it's, we now have to, now that we have an uncorrupted Justice Department and, hopefully an uncorrupted FBI, the investigations will lead where they're going to lead. But I see a few things, Davchet, about, what should I call you?
Dav, you can call me Dav, or you can even call me Davina. Now that, now that there's not a nutbag psychopath holding nuclear weapons at his disposal.
Yeah, I do feel a lot safer. I do feel a sense of relief and a tremendous celebration that I think a lot of people feel. But I really didn't exhale until Inauguration Day was over.
Me either. In some of my live broadcasts, there were trolls who would come in and say, ha, 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 our snipers are at the ready, which was very unnerving to me. And I was thinking, don't listen to them, the perimeter's secure. But I was still watching the inauguration, not just to enjoy it, but to see it proceed without violent incident and then breathe once it had concluded.
Yeah, I just had a conversation with a really far out, Trumpster, conspiracy theorist, Vietnam vet, who
Yes.
I've known in our community, who's disrupted, community meetings in the past, in which he told me that, it's not over just because he's inaugurated. They're not going to live for another month, and then the people are going to take back power. I was like, which people, and why do you think that's a good thing? And it's extraordinary how deep the sense of conspiracy is. But our government has sort of has tolerated and allowed this vast right-wing terrorism network to fester in our country, with a sense that the politicians don't want to be, quote, weak on the Second Amendment. And that means allow people to be terrorists. I think what we see with the Michigan militia attempt on Governor Whitmer's life, and I think what we just saw with the Capitol, I think there are people in Congress who are really ready to feel, that we really can't allow this to continue. Now, the question is what gets done about it and how we do that. And that might be a conversation for another day. I mean, I'm a believer in removing, in impeaching and convicting, but also evoking the 14th Amendment.
The anti-sedition part of the Constitution.
Yes, to remove from office Cruz and Haley, and Trump for incitement to insurrection. Because, if you look at, by the way, some of these Department of Justice, FBI terrorism prosecutions for Muslim terrorists, for conspiracy, all they did was talk about doing stuff. And then were encouraged by the FBI informant. Are you familiar with any of these cases? There are a lot of them. Mother Jones did a really interesting investigation of them. But all they did was talk about, and the informant, the FBI informant, sort of egged them on. And they did find people who wanted to do these things, but they egged them on and they said, yeah, let's do it. And let's go out and buy this, whatever stuff that was needed. And then the FBI caught them and clamped them down and put them in jail for like 20 or 30 years, simply for conspiring, Deb.
Yes.
So the idea of conspiring, the idea of inciting, the idea of being part of a conspiracy is a very, with racketeering statutes, it's very possible to prosecute this federally. And I think a lot is going to come out.
I think so too, because not only did some of the criminals who are less trained live stream their crimes, enabling some of the others to be caught on video. Walking hand on shoulder into the building in sort of military formation. I think we will be hearing more. And the fact that some of these details are appearing in charging documents that are not being blacked out, that are being released to the public, it shows that despite the pervasiveness of the rot, and when I'm talking about pervasiveness, I'm thinking of Lieutenant General Charles Flynn, who seems to have been involved in the decision not to send National Guard to the Capitol riot, that there was that delay with presumably the hope of just not let proceedings go ahead until there had been a mass overthrow and a mass slaughter of lawmakers in the Capitol.
Well, slaughter, whether there was a slaughter or whether there was just the disbanding, or whether there was the threat, or whether they
just held Pence hostage and said, throw out those electoral college votes. And now
put a gun to his head and said, if you want you and your family to live, say that you do not certify as vice president.
Yeah.
What's very interesting is the, a few different pieces of evidence. Did you see AOC's video about how she felt?
In danger? No, I haven't. But people have been recalling it today to say they got a very imminent sense of danger from her, talking about her brush with what she felt was her close brush with death.
Yes.
And so I'm more determined now than I was before to watch that.
What she specifically said, Deb, she did not trust the other members of the House who, were there with her and who presumably, like the QAnon, Boebert and Marjorie Greene, from texting their location. She did not trust them, and she was threatened by them, possibly knowing that these lunatics carry their guns with them.
Yes.
And, maybe thought they would be patriotic by, killing some of the enemy.
And Madison Cawthorn as well. And I'm thinking also of the biological terrorism that Republicans were committing against their colleagues by refusing to wear masks in the close containment quarters, because they did infect their Democratic colleagues.
At least 4 of them, including a black woman, congresswoman from New Jersey, who's 75 years old.
And a cancer survivor, yes. I'm just going to empower my moderators to mute this chap who's disruptive and a troll. We don't feel the need to indulge his First Amendment rights because we're not the government. This is a private platform, and we're not going to reward his desire for attention. So please block this chap if I have any. Oh, Phil, are you a moderator? Can you just mute that dude? Thank you. All right, and then he can cry about his oppression later, or just privately.
Yeah, Holly's a terrible victim. They're the big victims in this, right?
Yes, yeah. And it's a very developed muscle for where the victim. Somebody pointed out today on Twitter an account called Lincoln's Bible, and this is invaluable. It's one of the most invaluable things I think I've seen on Twitter. They pointed out that there is clearly a system of somebody in the GOP says something inflammatory, and there's maybe somebody planted in the media to amplify that point, like, oh no, has Joe Biden got a Rolex, or something ludicrous, or Maxine Waters can be blamed for the riot, and then that gets inflamed into a story, and everybody piles on and gets really outraged on Twitter because our measures for responses are to say, haha, you got ratioed, but that's just our measure of response. And it actually then fuels Fox News to run with the story that night of not just so-and-so claims Joe Biden has a Rolodex watch, and that's atrocious. The story becomes our response, the blue-checked Twitter outrage. And so we're feeding into that when we think our outrage is productive. And it's not actually productive. And our calling them out on hypocrisy doesn't win people over, because hypocrisy is still a very weak charge of saying you're not living up to your values. It's not an assertion of broader values, like saying, well, American values so-and-so. Just saying, how dare you be such a hypocrite, weak with weak source. And when we make ourselves into a Fox News segment, or we fuel a Fox News segment, let's avoid that if we can. So I think you and I have done a good job today of talking about the facts so far as they're unraveling about the Capitol riot, and not about the peripheral BS stories that go
right. Don't feed the trolls. Don't feed the trolls. I mean, what I've been tweeting is, let's talk about unity. Can we unify around the shared principle that we live in a democratic republic, and that the votes that people cast are what determines who gets to be in government and who gets to be president, not the intimidation of an armed insurrection of rioters? Can we unify around that freaking idea?
We can.
And you know what? Look, we can, but they won't even unify around that.
No.
They want to talk about unification, meaning agree with them, and as someone said, let's only half assassinate AOC, It's like,
oh my God. Yes.
And it is, there really is no tolerating or compromising with intolerance and violent suppression. You don't.
The Karl Popper premise of if you tolerate intolerance, you're helping foment fascism.
Yes, yeah. And there is fascism, and I've been writing about fascism and caring about it, and there's no. So what was they trying to do? They were installing a fascist dictatorship. And what was Trump's plan? So we have a few pieces of evidence. AOC said she didn't trust what was happening, but Giuliani's phone call.
To Tommy Tuberville to delay.
Why delay? So as an investigative journalist, I look at what benefit could there possibly be in delaying unless the cavalry was coming, meaning the insurrectionists, the rioters, were going to disrupt?
Yes.
So my sense of it is that there was, and Trump did pay for a number of those buses for that so-called nonprofit groups. It's incredible they have tax write-ups.
Pro-Trump super PACs.
Right.
Funded the organizations that paid, as well as Ginny Thomas and Turning Point.
And the demonstration. And he led them to the Capitol. Cruz stirred them up. Howley, stirred them up and said, we have to fight. We're not going to win unless we fight. And of course, as I laid out in my book, the claim that the election was fraudulent, which was clearly the writing was on the wall since the last election that he was going to do that.
Yes.
But what he was doing was waiting to disrupt that count, because there's in the Constitution, it speaks about they need to certify. The whole certification process exists because 120 years ago, there's no phone, there's no airplanes. People had to take, a stagecoach or a horse or, train. And they needed to have the seal of the Secretary of State. And the role of the VP was to read these seals and make sure they weren't forgeries. That someone hadn't ambushed the stage,
stagecoach. Yeah.
And done a forgery. So that they had to carry the seal. So the vice president had that sort of official chief clerk type of role.
Yes.
And yet they needed to do it within a certain period of time. And the Constitution is gray as to what happens if they don't do it in a certain period of time. Then it goes to, the state houses to vote, et cetera. Each state, voting once based on the number of their state legislatures. And Trump had a majority there. So what he wanted to see happen was Congress not to be able to certify. And disrupt Congress. And when I look at this as an investigative journalist, I see that throughout Trump's reign, there's only been one check and balance. There is the judiciary has refused to
play ball some of the time,
to slap him down or to slap his wrist. They've refused to stop him in terms of his use of executive branch power. They said that's up to. There's an instrument for that. It's called impeachment. Leave us the fuck alone. Well, leave us the fridge, the frack alone. Leave us alone. We're not gonna. That's not our job. We can't do that. And so they've been the only check and balance has been the power of Congress, has been the legislative branch of government. If Trump had disrupted that and made them all fear for their lives, and made the place that they gathered completely uninhabitable, there is no opportunity for them to meet. And there's chaos.
Yes.
What does he meet with chaos? He does two things. He declares martial law, with chaos, and he declares himself the de facto, until we resolve this in the courts, ruler of the government during this emergency decree. Which,
I think a clue towards his willingness to declare martial law is present in the notes of the My Pillow guy, Mike Lindell, who, even after the insurrection failed, turned up with notes of you can still declare martial law and do this and this and this, which was rebuffed at that point in time because presumably people were telling Trump. And I think the only people that seem to have checked Trump have been the people giving him legal advice. So he will do anything. He'll push any narrative.
Well, they gave him advice, but he did it anyway. I mean, or he did much of it. This was his way to get to martial law. And the thing that I'd like to stress tonight, just in terms of the big picture, is that every branch of government is an executive branch agency that serves at the will of the president, the commander-in-chief, except for Congress. Mm-hmm. Congress has limited oversight power. It has the power of impeachment if they could get together and do it, do the trial. But beyond that, the FBI, the Justice Department, the Army. I mean, if he replaced every commander in the Army in Cyber Command, with his cronies, after the election was such a red flag. Happened in our faces. We know this ever.
It's not time to go to the party yet, darling. It's still about 20 minutes. Okay, baby? 20 minutes. Why don't you brush your hair a little bit more? Sorry, I have a 6-year-old who's excited to go. No, not 6.
Is that your child?
Yeah. She's. Do you want to come say hi, Baba?
Yeah, it's ready.
I'm ready. Can you say hi?
Happy birthday!
No. She's going to a party. And she's excited to go to a party.
Whose party is it?
Whose party is it, baby?
My sister off. My friend.
Oh, la. Actually, yeah. Somebody's. It's her friend. And what are you going to take? Do you want? Oh, did you make the card? Maybe you forgot to make the card.
Oh, right.
Yeah. You go busy yourself.
Don't forget, you need to put your shoes in the mask.
I will put shoes and a mask on. Of course, I never forget that. Now you make the card. Make sure everything's all good. Ciao.
Yeah, I gotta make a card.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Alan, I'm going to say hi to Alan because I haven't yet. And he's pointing out that, yes, Trump may very well try again. But in the meantime, we are just unpacking so we can hold all the players accountable, because some of them obviously are still bedded into institutions, and there are still people in Congress who have likely been highly involved in the plot. So there are people who were named as helping with the rally that preceded the riot. So who have we got there? Mo Brooks, Andy Briggs, and Paul Gosar.
Yeah.
Republican Congress members. And then people who wanted to carry guns and avoid the magnetometers into Congress. We have Lauren Boebert, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and someone else. Andy Harris, someone called Andy Harris, who tried to take a gun onto the floor of Congress. And Boebert is reported to have given tours of the Capitol building on January the 5th to some family members. And some of those family members are affiliated with the Oath Keepers and the 3 Percenters.
Yeah, when the Capitol was closed, by the way. And we have that. And we have the woman who's the head of the squad in the Congress, that her panic buttons were ripped out before she even got there, before the day began, not by the rioters.
Yes.
But by who? By someone with access. Now, I'm hoping that the hallway video is very interesting. I am somewhat suspicious that one of the members of the Capitol Police committed suicide within days of this happening. Now, it could just be that he was depressed that this thing happened in his whole life, sort of, his reputation, their reputation was sullied by it.
I think two Capitol Police officers might have committed suicide by now.
Really?
Okay.
Well, anyway, it's interesting when that happens. But some people, I mean, the fact that they didn't have riot gear on, the fact they didn't even have helmets. I mean, at the place where some of the videos were taken, that they, that there was no sense of high fences or and that they had been ordered not to shoot anybody. Standing orders, and then you have Flynn's brother not, ordering in the,
participating in that conversation that said the optics of guards in the Capitol should be avoided.
And then this is while members of Congress were begging senior members of Congress for martial law, and with the sense that that they weren't going to deploy the military, and they were continue to. Hi, I'm Jonathan Greenberg. They're continuing to. I'm the author of this book, America 2034, and I've been writing a lot about fascism and Trump in the Washington Post. So they continue to be, to allow this or to permit this taking place and to enable. And Trump is watching this on this TV screen, and they're dancing and celebrating. He really did expect. Let's go back to the bottom line here. What did he expect to happen? He expected this process of certifying the vote to be upended. Yeah. And also the Pentagon lied about that afterward. I mean, when you think what's come out in the past 48 hours, the 2 stories today that have come out.
I can bring them up on screen, actually, Jonathan. While I keep us on screen, I can bring up the Washington Post story and also the New York Times story that's come out as well, which highlights that Trump was trying to overturn the newly appointed acting Attorney General, Rosen. I've forgotten his surname. It might be Jeffrey Rosen.
Yeah.
And there was somebody else who was proposing that Trump do something to Georgia to overturn the results in Georgia. We'll have a look in that in a second. But first of all, this is the Washington Post story that says self-styled militia members planned on storming the U.S. Capitol days in advance. So, which is good information to get out there to counterpoint that narrative that, oh, it's just some rioters who got angry because they felt like their voices weren't being heard and they were just convinced it was true that there were irregularities. That's how Republicans are trying to scale down their undermining of the election at this point. They're like, oh, no, we're not saying the election was stolen. We're not using the same rhetoric as Trump. We're just saying there's irregularities that should be investigated. And then they won't mention the 60 court cases that were lost by Trump's lawyers claiming irregularities without evidence or argument.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But and then you have the the line of the Defense Department. Now the FBI, there was intelligence about this disruption. Nancy Pelosi literally had a conversation with the head of the Capitol Police about security for January 6th. And he said, everything is fine. We're all prepared. We're ready. Yeah. These people did not have riot helmets. I mean, if you look, there's some videos of this side gate. These guys didn't even have a riot helmet on. They didn't have all
the DC Metropolitan Police did when they turned up because the Capitol was being overrun. But the initial response, the Capitol Police didn't have riot helmets, weren't authorized to have riot gear.
And didn't even have a high fence up.
Yeah.
You saw, and the information, the intelligence that there was a plan to storm the Capitol, never reached Nancy Pelosi. The Capitol Police did not divulge that, and the intelligence agencies had divulged it to the Capitol Police. I mean,
because there was the Capitol Police has their own intelligence section, and they had produced a report describing that there were risks, as far as I know, as well.
And they didn't let Pelosi know any of that. They didn't let the members of Congress know any of that. No. I mean, it's extraordinary. And so what we see these articles coming out. This article about the attorney, Trump wanting to fire the attorney general, acting attorney general who took Barr's place because he wouldn't, force Georgia to use the federal government to come in and somehow decertify, which has never been done in history. And they said they would resign if they tried to force him.
Yes, all of the senior officials of the Department of Justice were going to resign. So this is the face of Jeffrey Clark, who led the Justice Department's Civil Division and was trying to help Trump overturn Georgia, except the only thing that stopped that part of the plot was that all of the officials in the Department of Justice, all the senior officials said en masse that they would resign if Trump fired acting Attorney General Rosen and replaced him with Jeffrey Clark, who was willing to advance this plot. And it also turns out today as well that Jeffrey Clark is a member of the Federalist Society, that, conservative, constitutionally minded group of people who seemingly also have a strong devotion to authoritarianism.
Constitutional minded is such BS. I mean, they are the most activist shredders of constitutional rights, that have ever existed. I mean, it's pathetic that they consider themselves constitutionalists. I mean, Amy Coney Barrett, was, refused to say whether the Constitution calls for a peaceful transition of power under oath. Yeah. I mean,
that's too partisan. That's too partisan. I mean, just coming out with your opinion about that.
The Constitution exists to create a peaceful transition of power. If you don't have a peaceful transition of power, if you have whoever's got the strongest mob winning, you don't need a constitution. So this concept that I know the Federalist Society people, I've known some of them personally, and I find the hypocrisy, it's almost like we talked before about some of the narratives that you carried up, this notion that they're constitutionalists,
Yeah, I should have done air quotes saying constitutional, because I think the lack of a moral center at the heart of all most conservative intellectual proponents is hollow. There is a hollow moral center to it, and it's all been just polysyllabic words to excuse societal regression. It's all been.
I call them political fixers masquerading in black robes as judges. And I feel that
element of the Constitution. There is an element of the Constitution that is regressive and that is conciliatory towards slave owners, and that is the Electoral College. And I think Chris Hayes got into a lot of trouble for saying that the part of the Constitution that wasn't very much like the Constitution was that provision for the Electoral College. And that's because it was the baked-in cookie that was a concession. Like, oh, we've got all these high, noble constitutional ideas about democracy, but then we also have to say, to invite the slave owners on board, here you go, you can exert a thumb on the scales of power and wield a disproportionate influence over this political mechanisms for electing a president and for having senators for wielding power in the legislative branch.
Yeah. So how do we undo all this? Bring it up to that.
Well,
I think that I think the most important thing is really the Voting Rights Act, H.R. 1, that Nancy Pelosi tried to pass, because they only get to where they are by cheating, even with the Electoral College. I mean, by suppressing the votes of black people, as they have for, they call it, the Jim Crow filibuster right now, as they have for, centuries, and the so-called voter ID laws. And this has all been about, I think that's a felony offense, because there's a very clear, black people in America have a very clear right to vote. And
yes, and they're being disenfranchised.
Suppressing that right is a crime.
And that girl who submitted a thumb drive from her father, who was a GOP strategist, who was working on that, and that made it to a Supreme Court case, I think.
Yes.
And I don't recall the details, but I'll look it up. But yes, and I know that's a priority for the Biden administration, is the passage of a Voting Rights Act.
And then I think, statehood for Puerto Rico and DC would have 4 senators who would be Democrats, and 9 electoral votes, by the way. I've looked at, and, that many, 9 new members of Congress. And I think that's really necessary. And I think we've got to get rid of this filibuster. This idea that the minority party decides which legislation gets passed, it's insane. There's no country that does this. And it doesn't have to be this way. And so people are saying, well, if they get it, what would they do? And
I think the capital plot is going to remove a lot of objections and steal a lot of Democratic spines, because not only you finish the card. Yes. Now, did you write her name on it? And do you want to decorate it with any colors, or do you want us to leave it black and white? I feel like it's got some room for color. I think I'm going to have to go, Jonathan. I think my time is up for the party, but I love that we.
Oh, that's nice. Let's see.
You going to say goodbye, Jonathan?
Enjoy the birthday party.
Oh, she can't hear you. Hang on.
Enjoy the birthday party. Say happy birthday to your friends. 6-year-old parties are the most fun of all.
They are the most fun, aren't they? Well, it was so lovely. I'm so grateful you came on to talk to me, because I think it's so important to keep these issues alive in everybody's mind, because our attention has power in that it helps the Democratic Party feel that it has the backing of a core of decent people, because a lot of Republican voters or Republican affiliated voters are irredeemably lost to propaganda at the moment, and there's no easy fix to that. Time and focusing on pragmatic issues might help them pull away from their fabricated reality, but at the moment,
I think I'm looking forward to 1 or 2 years of criminal trials now. That will reach them even through their media sphere. Thank you very much. Enjoy the party. It's really great to see you.
So I'm getting pulled away. Okay, let's wave goodbye then.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Jonathan. I hope everybody likes watching the show. Thank you. Phil, good night. Alan, thank you. Democrats, they're making spine-like noises. I like it. I think there very well might be the prospect of getting rid of the filibuster, Jonathan. I have hope that this could happen because the behavior of Republicans who won't acknowledge the threat to lawmakers and the fact that they're trying to blame it on Maxine Waters and say everybody's responsible for the coup, I think that's going to help. That's what Kevin McCarthy said today. And Alan would like to see you come back. So at any point, invitation is always open and on the table. My guests enjoy our chats as well. So feel free. And again, what's your book? What's your book called, Jonathan?
America 2034, Utopia Rising. And hopefully, and it's the fiction, and hopefully it's still fiction.
Yes.
And we stop Trump from running again, so it doesn't.
Yeah, that would be great.
The future. Okay. Bye now.
Thank you. Bye. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.